fucking awesome. Come on, it's gonna be fucking awesome. You know the words. It's gonna be fucking awesome. That's it, say. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Yeah!
Yo ho, everyone out there in space. How you doing? It's me, your friend, Jesse Blaze Snyder, the coolest geek alive. And I am coming to you today with one of the greatest gifts I have to offer you. I am bringing you some of the greatest Batman stories ever written, the mythology that people talk about when they talk about their love of Batman, and when I say that they haven't gotten Batman right on the big screen, you're going to find out why. And this, if you read everything that I point you to here, it's going to take a minute. I think I'm giving you like years worth of reading. But you can find this stuff, and it is wonderful. Not a stinker in the bunch. I mean, maybe an issue here or there, but everything that I'm recommending in general is just some of the greatest Batman stuff and the most important and pivotal Batman stuff to understand the Batman mythology. Because really, the thing about Batman is like, some people like that bang, pow, zoom Batman thing, but Batman done at a really high level as a detective comic and about these crazy people who are walking the streets and about him solving murders and doing things that are very street level and handling them in a very intellectual way. One of the screw ups of all the Batman movies has been that they're always focused on his relationships instead of him fighting crime. He is single-mindedly focused on fighting crime. He doesn't have time for love. And that is a really main feature of him that, they just kind of keep missing. And the other part of it that they keep missing is that it got richer being taken seriously and, getting past that bang, pow, zoom thing. And after a little bit of the mythology developed, and that mythology was Robin, Dick Grayson, growing up, joining the Teen Titans, and eventually deciding, you know what, I've had it with Batman. He's so emotionless and damaged, and he's like, hurting my feelings, essentially. I keep reaching out to him, and he keeps kind of rebuffing me. And he goes off on his own to be Nightwing, and I think initially leading like a new incarnation of the Teen Titans, which I don't have that on my list, but if you wanted to read some of that part of him switching into Nightwing on the Teen Titans, it would be worth it to you to read his journey with George Perez, and Marv Wolfman is the writer for the new Teen Titans. I never read that stuff myself. Generally speaking, everything that's on this list I have read, and I've the majority of this stuff, vast majority of this stuff. There's a couple things that I'm gonna mention I haven't read all of, or I haven't read, but not too many, actually. I love Batman, and I really tried to stick to the things that I can really stand behind as awesome. I'm going to start here with Batman Year One by Frank Miller. It's not my favorite, actually, personally. There's also a Batman Year 2 that I never read by Mike W. Barr, who's pretty good. I like a lot of his stuff. I had never read that one. I didn't like Batman Year 1. As I said, Batman deeper into his lore is so much more interesting. When you can get to Batman walking down the hallway and there's all these lunatics' names on plates, and you know who he's passing by. There's Edward Nygma, and there's Jonathan Crane, and here's Name Unknown. It's the Joker. The atmosphere created of who could it be when a mystery happens, reading the comics of like, ooh, is it this guy? Is it that guy? Is it this? Especially after years and years, if I put myself on the spot because I didn't write a bunch of them down beforehand, I'm going to like blank out. But if I wanted to sit here, I could eventually come up with literally like 40 different Batman villains. And I mean that. And I'll end up talking about 4 different Batman villains before the show's over. But let's see. This next one is one of my absolute favorites. And I mean, it is worth just kind of starting from the beginning here because this is just all great stuff. And to read it in this order and some of the things that are in the beginning of what I'm offering up to you here are amazing. I'm not a huge fan of Year One, but people love it. People love Batman Begins. Batman Begins and Batman Year One have some parallels, and Batman Year One has just so many great pieces of art in it. But the next one, Batman Venom by Denny O'Neil, is awesome. It's Batman fighting an addiction essentially to steroids, a thing called Venom that is used by the Bane character in the comics. And the Bane character in the comics is really great. What they did with him in the film is interesting. In the comics, he is much different and awesome. We'll get to some of those books in a little bit. But this story of Batman overcoming an addiction to Venom because basically he has somebody die because he's not strong enough to save them. Like he's not physically strong enough to save them. And he has this Venom stuff there. I forget why. A lot of these books, forgive me, I haven't read them in a long time, so I'm just going to be giving basics of some stuff. And the Venom is, I guess, addictive. And, I don't want to spoil any of this stuff. So I'm just going to say it's awesome. It's really, really awesome. And it's such a small story. It is the equivalent of, Batman Year One because it's an early story of Batman when there's not a lot of villains on the table. It's the early days and he has to overcome this addiction. And I was kind of blown away by how great this story was at the time when I read it. So I highly recommend Batman Venom by Denny O'Neil. Next up, we've got Batman Gothic by Grant Morrison. I barely remember it, but I do remember really loving it. But I'm just going to recommend that one anyway. Batman War on Crime by Dini and Ross. It's fully painted. It's really big. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called, War on Crime. I might be wrong about that. I didn't look it up. That was just what I remembered it being. And it's a very simple story, but it's great. Paul Dini's awesome. He's later on this list as well. Batman Haunted Night by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. It collects a whole bunch of different stories by these two creators. I spoke about them last time when I did the 101 comic books to, make you a fan for life for Marvel DC. I forget what the exact title that I made it was. And that's next up here, The Long Halloween, and the follow-up to The Long Halloween, which was a story called Dark Victory. These were all by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. They're great. Haunted Night is really awesome because it just collects a whole bunch of different little ones. There's also a collection. It's called Batman Collected Legends of the Dark Knight. It has the first Tim Sale story in it that he ever did in comics. It's not written by Jeff Loeb, but it's awesome. There's a few other stories in there like Batmite and more. There's also a story called Batman, the Man Who Laughs by Ed Brubaker and Doug Mank. Doug Mank and Ed Brubaker, they'll be on this list, a bunch more. They are awesome, awesome, awesome creators. Next up, Batman Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison and Dave McKean. I think that's actually on my list from the previous 101. It's so classic. It's painted. It's beautiful. It's really cool. And talk about that walking down the hallway with all of the monsters at Arkham Asylum. Like this really,
I believe that had already been established by the time Grant Morrison got his hands on it, but it's so well done by him and that painter, I believe, again, Dave McKean. So then we've got the early Robin stuff, which is summed up rather well with Robin Year One and Batgirl Year One by Chuck Dixon, Scott Beatty, Marcos Martin, and Javier Pulido, who those two artists at the end, Marcos Martin and Javier Pulido, they are both incredible. Their work is so great. And Chuck Dixon, dude, that man is responsible for so much great stuff. Like, there's some great characters he created in Nightwing and some of these books, and we're gonna get to these things in a second, but he rules my school, Chuck Dixon. He's awesome. Now you got some Nightwing Year One by Dixon and McDaniel, which is the changeover from Dick Grayson into Nightwing. It's got a little bit of the Titans story in it. It kind of sums all that stuff up. If you want the full story, you can get the Marv Wolfman and George Perez New Teen Titans. Batman the Killing Joke by Alan Moore and Brian Boland. It's one of my favorite. The artwork by Brian Boland in this book is just so incredible and iconic. Just defined the Joker and Batman and their relationship in so many ways, and made a really swift and important and interesting change for Barbara Gordon. And of course, Barbara Gordon goes on to be a character known as Oracle, and she works with various agents, usually female, as Oracle, like sending them around. It's kind of like a James Bond kind of thing with all these cool female spies, led by Black Canary, which starts out with Black Canary. There's a bunch of different trades, all of those written by Chuck Dixon as well. Like I said, Chuck Dixon's awesome. If you see Chuck Dixon's name on something related to Batman and you want to get into Batman, read it. Very good at what he does. In a lot of cases, he's had to sum up a lot of classic stories with some of these year ones and stuff, and he always does a really elegant and great job making the most of it. And there's great artists and all this stuff. So moving on, we've got Jason Todd, and now another terrible moment in the Batman mythology. Batman, A Death in the Family is what the trade paperback would be called. It's by Jim Starlin, Marv Wolfman, Jim Aparo, and George Perez. I think there's a few more creators on top of that. But this is where Jason Todd gets beaten to death. There was a poll that they put up for people to a phone number to call and say, basically, should they kill him or should he live or should he die? Should they kill him? Should they kill him, or should he live, or should he die? And basically the audience, by a small margin, voted to kill him. So, because he was the new Robin, and generally speaking, that's the thing. People hate the replacement when it comes in, and people hated Jason Todd a little more than they liked him, I guess. And in this storyline, Robin you know what? I'm not going to spoil it completely. It's great, but let's just say there's a death in the family. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, also very cool from around this time, you've got Batman, Birth of the Demon is the trade paperback. It contains Son of the Demon, which is super dope. This is by Mike W. Barr and Dennis O'Neil. Oh my God, I love Son of the Demon. Very cool. I was so happy to see Grant Morrison follow up on it many years later. You've also got Batman, A Lonely Place of Dying by Marv Wolfman, George Perez, and Jim Aparo at this time. I don't remember what this book was about, but I did read it. I recognized the cover immediately, and I was like, oh yeah, that was good. But I can't remember. It's kind of blurring together. I think it was actually about Batman mourning the death of Jason Todd, the Robin who had just died. I'm not certain of that, though. So then we get introduced to the new Robin, and there's a trade paperback called Robin, A Hero Reborn. Tim Drake Robin. He is great. He is unique in his own right. He's a detective. Dick Grayson, if you don't know Dick Grayson, he was an acrobat. and came from the circus. Tim Drake, he doesn't have a background like that, but he's a really smart kid, and he figures out who Batman is. And basically also figures out that Batman had gotten like darker and become more brutal because he didn't have a child to like remind him what he was doing this for, kind of thing. And so he found out who Batman was and demanded essentially to be his new Robin. And Tim Drake is a wonderful character. I really enjoy him. His series is not as killer for me as the Nightwing series that Chuck Dixon wrote. The Nightwing series is killer, but there is some great things that happen in the Chuck Dixon Robin, and you should check out any of those. But bounce around a little bit. You're going to get a little bit of the overall story here. So read the things that sound the most interesting to you. But I do urge you to probably wait on some of the newer things. And I might stop this list at a certain point because the list goes really long for a while. So I might break this up into like 2 or 3 weekend episodes and give you this bit. But this is the places that you want to start. I say, actually, like I'll stop at around like 26 minutes or something because that's my lucky number. Okay, let's see. Next up, we've got Birds of Prey, I already talked about. Nightwing, I already talked about. Birds of Prey, I don't know how many issues are collected. I don't think it's as many as there are for Nightwing. Nightwing, there is a ton of killer stuff, and it goes on afterwards with a few other writers taking over, not really doing as much justice to it as was happening previously with Chuck. But first batch of them, Devin Grayson wrote some good stuff. There was some things that were strong. I think Ed Brubaker might have written some Nightwing for a little while, and that was strong. Ed Brubaker's awesome. He was on this list. I don't know if any of those things are collected, but if you like these characters, there's more. There's a ton of Nightwing from Chuck Dixon. Read all the Nightwing Chuck Dixon you can find, and then move on to anything else if you're interested. Batman Sword of Azrael, Dennis O'Neil, and Joe Quesada. Oh, great one. This introduces Azrael to the Batman family, and he'll be important because of Nightfall. Eventually, he takes over for Batman when Batman gets his back broken. But in between that happening, there's a whole bunch of trade paperbacks for the stories called Batman Nightfall. Now, this was, for me, the beginning of me getting into Batman. I was given The Long Halloween first. I loved The Long Halloween. I talked about how much I loved it on the 101 show. And then I was directed to go get Nightfall. And that's where I started with things. And it's awesome. There's just such a big lead up to it. Bane is such an interesting character. And I don't want to spoil it too much and talk about it for too long because I want to be able to get to some more, but he is so much more interesting than he's been depicted on the big screen. And the story of him wearing Batman down, and basically one of the first things he does is he breaks out all of the insane people from Arkham Asylum, and Batman's going out of his mind trying to get all these people back in the asylum. And then when he's finally, well, I'll let you read the book. Anyway, Nightwing almost takes over in Batman Prodigal after this. This is by Chuck Dixon. A lot of this is by Chuck Dixon. I think there's some other people as well involved, maybe Denny O'Neil. Afterwards here, also Batman Cantigen is around by Dixon. I vaguely remember that one. I think it was pretty good. Also, the JLA. We got New World Order is the beginning of JLA. This is by Morrison and Porter. The JLA series is so great. It starts out with Grant Morrison and Howard Porter. Eventually, it switches over to Mark Waid. Mark Waid, I think, does a storyline with Howard Porter, which is the best one, Tower of Babel, the first one, kicking off his storyline. And then there's a whole bunch of other ones. Brian Hitch draws some things. And if you don't know comics artists, these are some really wonderful artists. It is worth your time to dig into JLA right there and that whole run. that is just a marquee for the Justice League. Next up, I also recommend, because this was my first entry into reading the Batman books monthly, I came in during No Man's Land, and I came in actually halfway through No Man's Land, and I had to go back later and read Batman Cataclysm, which is the first trade paperback that collects many different volumes of comic books together, or many individual issues that make up this introduction into this storyline where there's an earthquake in Gotham City and it becomes like Condemned. And then Batman's in No Man's Land defending the people who were left behind because they're being terrorized by all of the insane people who have escaped from Arkham Asylum because of the earthquake. Anyway, it's some wonderful, wonderful stuff. From here, there was a ton of great characters that came out of here. Characters like Officer Hardback and the introduction of Renee Montoya into the universe, who was introduced originally in the animated series. So you started to get a look at some of the police officers, because writers like Greg Rucka and Ed Brubaker, they really liked crime stuff and hard-boiled crime, and they liked the Jim Gordon character and that connection between Batman and these police officers. And it ended up being done really well. There's a series called Gotham Central by Rucka and Brubaker and artist Michael Lark that is awesome. It went on for a long time. I highly recommend Gotham Central. So fun. Created such great atmosphere. And a character that came out during that time was Batgirl, the Cassandra Cain Batgirl, done such a great injustice in that stupid Birds of Prey film. She is so cool. And Damian Scott and Kelly Plunkett, I believe. I didn't look this one up, but I'm pretty sure it was Kelly Plunkett and Damian Scott. Damian Scott's definitely the artist. Oh my God. I love that book. There's definitely some trade paperbacks that you can find. So good. And coming out of No Man's Land, you had a lot of wonderful things by Greg Rucka. And some of the trade paperbacks with his name on them include Batman Evolution, Batman Turning Points, Batman Officer Down, Batman Huntress Cry Blood. That one's good. It's about the Huntress, but not as good as some of the other ones. The stuff from his Detective Comics run, I think Batman Evolution is the beginning of it, was really great. The artist, Dave Johnson, one of my favorite artists, did a lot of the covers. And so the cover gallery in these trade paperbacks is going to be something to behold. You want to rip those things out and put them up on your wall like I would do. Let's see. I don't know. Do I have time to continue any further here, or do I save all of this for a part 2? Let me look at what I got here.
Okay, I was going to say last one, but I just realized a major one that I was missing. Batman Faces, I think it's called, by Matt Wagner. Dude, that's awesome. The story of Batman's relationship with Two-Face, because he was friends with Harvey Dent before Harvey Dent became Two-Face. Harvey Dent was the district attorney, and he had a relationship with him, and then he went crazy. That story has been really, really executed so well so many times in comics, and you got to find those books. But the last one that we'll put on the list is Batman Hush, and the beginnings of the idea that Red Hood might come back in this story, drawn by Jim Lee, written by Jeff Loeb, who I recommended so many times because of his work with Tim Sale, which is the best. But Batman Hush, I mean, you've seen probably so many action figures and so many posters and pieces of work from Batman Hush. It's perhaps the most famous Batman story of all time. But it cannot really be properly enjoyed without knowing the history of Batman, because it includes nods to Jason Todd, the Robin who died. It includes Nightwing and Catwoman and all these different characters and all these relationships. So go and read the things on this list first. And I am going to make a part 2 next week, but I really think you should just read what I've given you here, because this is the stuff you want to read. There's more wonderful things to come, but they won't mean as much if you don't get the foundations of Nightwing and
Batgirl, Cassandra Cain Batgirl, I mean, and Oracle, which is Barbara Gordon, the character that she becomes when she gets shot in the spine by the Joker and Killing Joke, and the build out of these characters. Dick Grayson, get to know Dick Grayson, get to know Tim Drake, get to know Barbara Gordon and Cassandra Cain, get to know more obscure characters. Lucius Fox has come to be known now, and obviously, Alfred and Commissioner Gordon, but there's some characters who have helped out in the Batcave that are rather interesting that might show up in a couple of these things, and I won't spoil any of it because I want you to find. Sometimes some of it sounds silly too, but when you see how rooted and well done all of these things are, I think you'll agree. Batman has one of the richest mythologies in comic books and has been lovingly executed by people who care about it for a long time. And kudos to Chuck Dixon, man. He's all over this damn list. I mean, it's just so much good work by him. And get your Batman foundations and then come back to me next week for part 2 of the Batman reading list. But these are the foundational things. These are the important ones. Honestly, these were all the things that I went back to read as the classics. And everything else on this list past this was things that I was reading comics. I was all caught up by then. And I mean, some of the things that we talked about, I was caught up by then at the end. But do yourself a favor, go read all these freaking books. And join me next Saturday for part 2 of the Batman Files, how to get into Batman for the rest of your life, or something like that. I don't know. And join me every Wednesday for another fabulous episode of The Coolest Geek Alive.
It's my favorite part. Isn't that heavy? I played that. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Coolest alive. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Stay with your tribe. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Revenge of the Geeks. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Week after weeks. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Laughing with you. It's gonna be fucking awesome. And crying sometimes too. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Spelling it out. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Making you shout.
You've been listening to Coolest Geek Alive with me, your host, Jesse Blaze Snyder. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe for more excellent geek culture content. Thanks for listening.
You like that? It's a kazoo solo. I played that too. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Talking some shit. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Living the shit. My voice gonna be fucking awesome. Foot in our mouth. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Get in the mouth. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Tell all your friends. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Call right on text. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Raising the bar. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Straight to the stars. It's gonna be fucking awesome. It's starting soon. It's going to be fucking awesome. Fucking awesome. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Just wait. You'll see. You'll all see.
The podcast playground. Hooray!